He humiliated his wife at his birthday party, forcing their children to call his mistress Mom in front of everyone. His mother laughed. His sister recorded it. But when the estate attorney revealed his wife's father built the mansion they partied in, his crown turned to dust. The champagne was flowing, the music was loud, and Devon was living his best life. At least, that's what he thought. It was his 40th birthday, and he'd made sure everyone knew it. The mansion was lit up like a movie set, with catering tables stretching across the marble foyer and a live jazz band playing in the grand ballroom. Important people from his company had shown up. Executives, managers, colleagues who wanted to be seen at the VP's birthday bash. Devon walked through the crowd in his custom suit, shaking hands and accepting congratulations like he was royalty. And in his mind, he was. But if you looked closely, really paid attention, you'd notice something off about the whole scene. You'd see a woman in the background, moving quietly through the kitchen, checking on the caterers, making sure the flowers were arranged just right, ensuring every detail was perfect. That woman was Simone, Devon's wife. She wore a simple black dress, nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and around her neck hung a small gold locket that she touched every now and then, like it was giving her strength. She'd been up since 6 that morning coordinating this entire party. She'd called the vendors, confirmed the guest list, picked out the decorations, but Devon hadn't thanked her once. He'd barely looked at her all day. Simone was used to being invisible in her own marriage. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Devon looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. But that was 4 years ago, back when they first got married. Now she was just the woman who kept things running while he climbed the corporate ladder and forgot where he came from. And tonight, she was about to find out just how little he valued her. Devon's mother, Beverly, was holding court in the living room, surrounded by guests who hung on her every word. Beverly was a loud woman, the type who laughed too hard at her own jokes and had an opinion about everything. She'd never liked Simone, thought her son had married beneath him, and she made sure Simone knew it every chance she got. Tonight was no different. Beverly spotted Simone near the kitchen door and called out loud enough for half the room to hear. "Simone, honey, make sure you check on those shrimp platters. We can't have the guests going hungry now, can we?" Beverly's smile was sweet, but her eyes were cold. A few guests glanced over, some looking uncomfortable, others pretending they didn't hear. Simone nodded quietly and disappeared back into the kitchen. She was good at disappearing. It was a skill she'd learned over the past few years. Devon's sister, Rochelle, was in the corner of the room, phone in hand, live streaming the party to her followers. Rochelle was younger than Devon by 5 years, and she'd built a small following on social media by posting about her life, her outfits, her brother's success. She loved being associated with Devon's rise in the corporate world. It made her feel important, and like her mother, Rochelle had no love for Simone. She thought her brother's wife was boring, too quiet, not glamorous enough for a man of Devon's status. But the real shock of the night hadn't happened yet. That came when the front door opened and Crystal walked in. Crystal was everything Simone wasn't, at least in Devon's eyes. She wore a tight red dress that hugged every curve, her hair flowing in perfect waves down her back. Her heels were so high they made her tower over most of the guests, and she walked with the confidence of a woman who knew every eye in the room was on her. Crystal worked with Devon at the development firm. She was a project coordinator, ambitious and ruthless, the type of woman who saw every interaction as an opportunity to climb higher. And 6 months ago, she'd set her sights on Devon. The affair had started small, late nights at the office, business dinners that went on too long, text messages that Devon thought he was hiding. But Simone knew. She always knew. She'd seen the way Devon's face lit up when his phone buzzed. She'd noticed the new cologne, the extra care he took getting dressed in the mornings. but she'd said nothing, because Simone had learned a long time ago that sometimes silence was the most powerful response. Devon's face broke into a wide grin when he saw Crystal. He crossed the room quickly, wrapping his arm around her waist and kissing her cheek in front of everyone. Some guests looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered, but Beverly clapped her hands together like she'd just witnessed something wonderful. "There she is," Beverly announced. "Crystal, darling, you look absolutely stunning. Come sit with us." Rochelle immediately stopped her live stream and rushed over, hugging Crystal like they were old friends. "Girl, that dress. You need to drop the link because you are serving tonight." Crystal laughed, soaking up the attention. She glanced around the room until her eyes landed on Simone, who was standing near the entrance to the dining room. For just a moment, the two women locked eyes. Simone's expression didn't change. She just looked at Crystal with a calmness that was almost unnerving. Then she turned and walked away. Dinner was served in the grand dining room, a massive space with vaulted ceilings and a chandelier that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. The long mahogany table could seat 30 people, and tonight it was packed with guests, all dressed in their finest, all there to celebrate Devon. He sat at the head of the table naturally, and to everyone's shock, he gestured for Crystal to sit in the chair beside him, the chair that should have been Simone's. Simone didn't say anything. She just took a seat further down the table, near the end, close to the kitchen so she could help serve, if needed. Devon's two children, 8-year-old Brianna and 6-year-old Jamal, sat across from their mother looking confused. They kept glancing between their father and the strange woman in the red dress, trying to understand what was happening. Beverly stood up, tapping her wine glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," she announced, her voice carrying through the room, "to my son Devon, 40 years old and finally coming into his own. Finally understanding what he deserves. Finally recognizing quality when he sees it." She looked directly at Crystal when she said that last part, and the meaning was clear. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rochelle raised her glass enthusiastically, already recording again. And Devon, drunk on attention and expensive whiskey, just smiled. But then Devon did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He cleared his throat and looked down the table at his children. "Brianna, Jamal, come here for a second." The kids slid out of their chairs and walked slowly toward their father, unsure what he wanted. When they reached him, Devon put a hand on each of their shoulders and gestured toward Crystal. "I want you two to call Miss Crystal Mom from now on, you hear me? Your real mother doesn't deserve that title." The room went dead silent. It was one of those moments where even the music seemed to stop, where time itself seemed to hold its breath. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. Jamal looked at his father like he didn't recognize him. Down at the end of the table, Simone's hand tightened around her fork, but her face remained calm. Only the slight tremor in her fingers gave away what she was feeling. Beverly broke the silence with a loud, sharp laugh. About time someone showed her she's replaceable. Rochelle, phone still recording, zoomed in on Simone's face, capturing the moment for her followers. "This is wild," she whispered into the camera, but her voice carried. "Y'all seeing this?" Some of the guests looked away, ashamed to be witnessing this. A few women shook their heads in disgust. Devon's business partner, Andre, sat frozen, his jaw clenched, wanting to say something but knowing it wasn't his place. An older woman near the middle of the table, Mrs. Patterson, a family friend who'd known Simone for years, stood abruptly and excused herself, unable to watch anymore. Crystal leaned into Devon, kissing his cheek, playing her role perfectly. She looked at the children with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, sweethearts." But the damage was done. Brianna pulled away from her father and ran down the table to her mother. Jamal followed, both of them crying, burying their faces in Simone's arms. Simone held them close, whispering something only they could hear, and then she stood, guiding them toward the door. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word. She walked through the dining room with her children, through the hallway, and out into the garden, leaving the party behind. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. The sound of the party was muffled out here, just a distant hum of music and laughter. Simone sat on a stone bench near the rose bushes her father had planted years ago, back when this estate was just his dream. Brianna and Jamal clung to her, and she held them, rocking them gently, humming a soft tune her own father used to hum to her. After a few minutes, Mrs. Patterson found them. The older woman had left the party and tracked Simone down, unable to let this moment pass without saying something. She sat beside Simone on the bench, her face full of sadness and anger. "Baby, why do you stay?" Mrs. Patterson asked softly. "No woman should endure what you just went through in there." Simone was quiet for a moment, looking up at the stars. Then she touched the gold locket around her neck, the one she never took off. "Because I made a promise to my father," she said quietly, "to never let anger make me forget who I am." Mrs. Patterson didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. She squeezed Simone's hand and went back inside, leaving her alone with her thoughts and her children. Simone opened the locket, looking at the photo inside. It was her father, Malcolm, smiling at the camera with that gentle, knowing smile of his. Below the photo was an engraving. "Royalty doesn't announce itself." She'd been carrying those words with her for 15 years, ever since her father gave her this locket, and she'd lived by them every single day. But tonight she wondered if maybe it was time for royalty to speak up. To understand what happened in that mansion on Devon's 40th birthday, you have to go back 25 years, back to when Simone was just a little girl growing up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta. She lived in a small 3-bedroom house with her father, Malcolm Hayes. Her mother had passed away when Simone was 2, so it was just the two of them, and Malcolm made sure his daughter never felt like she was missing anything. Malcolm was a quiet man, the kind who listened more than he spoke. He worked long hours, sometimes leaving before sunrise and coming home after dark. Young Simone thought he was a construction worker or maybe a property manager. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know that her father was building an empire. Malcolm Hayes was a genius when it came to real estate. He'd started with nothing, just a high school diploma and a dream. He worked construction jobs during the day and studied property law at night. He saved every penny, lived in a tiny apartment, ate ramen for years, and slowly, painfully, slowly, he started buying properties, foreclosures, fixer-uppers, land that nobody wanted. He'd renovate them, flip them, reinvest the profits. Over 20 years, he built a portfolio worth hundreds of millions, then billions. But here's the thing about Malcolm, he never showed it. He kept his wealth hidden, operated through shell companies, reinvested everything. He didn't drive fancy cars or wear expensive clothes. He didn't brag or show off. He wanted to protect his daughter from gold diggers, from fake friends, from people who would love her for what she had instead of who she was. So he raised Simone in simplicity. She went to public school, wore regular clothes, had normal friends. She helped her father in the garden on weekends, learned to cook, did her homework at the kitchen table. Malcolm taught her about character, about kindness, about treating people with respect regardless of what they had. He taught her that true wealth wasn't in your bank account, it was in your heart. On Simone's 10th birthday, Malcolm gave her the gold locket. She remembered that day so clearly. They'd had a small party, just the two of them and a few neighbors. After everyone left, Malcolm sat her down and placed the locket in her small hands. "This is special," he told her. his voice serious. "Inside is my picture and a message. I want you to wear this every day, baby girl, and one day when you're older, you'll understand what it means." Young Simone opened the locket and read the engraving. "Royalty doesn't announce itself." "What does that mean, Daddy?" she'd asked. Malcolm smiled and tapped her chest, right over her heart. "It means you don't have to tell people you're special. You just are. And the right people will see it without you saying a word." Simone wore that locket every single day from that moment on. Through middle school, through high school, through college, it became a part of her, a reminder of who she was and where she came from. Malcolm passed away suddenly when Simone was 20 years old. She was in her junior year at Spelman College, studying education because she wanted to be a teacher. She got the call early one morning. Her father had suffered a massive heart attack at one of his properties. By the time she got to the hospital, he was gone. The funeral was small, just like Malcolm would have wanted. But Simone noticed something strange. There were men in expensive suits there, people she'd never seen before, business associates, lawyers, investors. After the service, one of them approached her. His name was Robert Harrison, and he introduced himself as her father's attorney. "Miss Hayes, we need to talk," he said gently. "Your father left some things for you." Simone followed him to a quiet room in the funeral home, confused and heartbroken. Mr. Harrison opened a briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. And then he told her everything. Her father wasn't just a construction worker. He was Malcolm Hayes, one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the Southeast. He owned properties in 3 states, apartment complexes, commercial buildings, shopping centers, land. The estate was currently valued at $2.3 billion. And all of it, every single penny, belonged to Simone. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't process it. $2.3 billion. Her father, the man who wore the same work boots for 5 years, the man who clipped coupons and fixed his own car, was a billionaire. Mr. Harrison explained everything: the shell companies, the reinvestments, the strategy. Malcolm had built his empire in silence specifically so Simone could grow up normal, and his will was very specific. Simone wasn't to know about the wealth until after his death, and even then, she was encouraged to live simply until she found herself. The money was her safety net, not her identity. The estate mansion, the one where Devon would one day throw his 40th birthday party, was one of Malcolm's properties. He'd built it himself, overseeing every detail, planning for it to be his retirement home. But he never got to enjoy it. Mr. Harrison became Simone's trustee, managing the properties and investments while she finished school, and Simone made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She decided to honor her father's wish. She wouldn't tell anyone about the money. She'd live simply, work hard, and let people love her for who she was, not what she had. That decision is what led her to Devon 5 years later. She met him at a community fundraiser in Atlanta. Devon was a mid-level manager at a development firm, ambitious and charming. He had this smile that lit up a room, this confidence that made you want to be around him. Simone was volunteering at the event, helping to organize donations for a local youth center. Devon approached her, started talking, made her laugh. And for the first time since her father's death, Simone felt something close to happiness. They dated for 6 months. Devon was attentive, thoughtful, everything she thought she wanted. He opened doors for her, called when he said he would, talked about building a future together. Simone fell in love, and when he proposed, she said yes, without hesitation. But she never told him about the money. She wanted him to love her for herself. And besides, her father's words echoed in her mind. Royalty doesn't announce itself. When they got married, Simone approached Mr. Harrison with a request. She wanted to live in her father's estate mansion. Mr. Harrison was hesitant, but Simone insisted. She told Devon it was a rental, a lucky deal through a friend of a friend. Devon didn't ask many questions. He was just happy to be living in a mansion, impressing his colleagues, climbing the social ladder. For the first year, things were good. Devon was loving, present. They had Brianna, then Jamal 2 years later. Simone threw herself into motherhood, volunteering at the kids' school, managing her father's charity foundation anonymously. She was happy, or at least she thought she was. But as Devon's career took off, things changed. He got promoted to senior manager, then director, then VP. With each promotion came a bigger ego, a colder heart. He started making comments about Simone not working, about her not contributing financially. He didn't know she was running a multi-million-dollar foundation. He didn't know she owned the building his company leased. He didn't know anything real about her because he'd never bothered to ask. Then Crystal came into the picture. Devon met her at work about a year ago. She was everything he thought represented success. Designer clothes, luxury lifestyle, the kind of woman who posted her life on social media for validation. They started having lunch together, then drinks after work, then late-night business meetings that Simone knew had nothing to do with business. Beverly and Rochelle only made it worse. They'd never thought Simone was good enough for Devon, and now they had ammunition. They whispered in his ear, told him he deserved better, encouraged the affair. Beverly actually introduced Crystal to the family before Devon officially left Simone. She threw a dinner party and invited Crystal, seating her in Simone's spot at the table. Rochelle started posting photos on social media, calling Crystal the one who got away and tagging her brother. The disrespect was public, intentional, cruel. Devon stopped hiding the affair 6 months before his birthday. He brought Crystal to the house openly, let her rearrange furniture, treated her like she belonged there. Simone watched it all in silence, holding on to her father's words, trying to stay calm for the children. 2 weeks before the birthday party, Devon finally said it out loud. "I want a divorce. You can leave with nothing." They were standing in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Simone had cooked thousands of meals for him, where she'd held their babies, where she'd built a life. Devon's words were cold, matter-of-fact, like he was firing an employee. "What about the kids?" Simone asked quietly. "They'll stay with me and Crystal, a real woman who can give them a real future." Beverly, who'd been sitting in the living room, called out her agreement. "You've been freeloading long enough, girl. Time to go." That night, after Devon went to bed and the kids were asleep, Simone sat alone in the dark. She opened her locket, stared at her father's face, remembered everything he'd taught her, and then she picked up her phone and called Mr. Harrison. "I think it's time," she said simply. Mr. Harrison understood immediately. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'll prepare the documents." And that's how we end up back at the birthday party, back to the moment when everything Devon thought he knew about his life was about to shatter into a million pieces. After Simone left the dining room with the children, the party continued. Devon was too drunk and too arrogant to let her absence bother him. He made another toast, danced with Crystal, posed for photos that Rochelle eagerly posted online. His guests tried to enjoy themselves, but there was an uncomfortable energy in the air, like everyone knew they'd just witnessed something terrible. Around 10 p.m., the music was at its peak. People were dancing, and Devon was in the middle of the ballroom, celebrating himself like a king. That's when the headlights appeared in the circular driveway. A black Mercedes pulled up to the front entrance. The driver stepped out first, opening the back door, and out stepped Mr. Robert Harrison, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He was followed by 2 other attorneys, equally well-dressed, equally serious. One of the guests spotted them through the window. "Devon, man, who invited lawyers to your party?" Devon turned, squinting toward the entrance. He was confused, annoyed. This was his night. Who the hell were these people? Mr. Harrison walked straight through the mansion like he owned it, because technically, his client did. He moved past the confused guests, past the catering tables, past Beverly and Rochelle, heading directly toward the garden. He found Simone exactly where he expected to, sitting on the stone bench, her children asleep beside her, her hand on that gold locket. "It's time," Mr. Harrison said gently. Simone looked up at him, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Let's do this." She kissed her sleeping children's foreheads, asked Mrs. Patterson to watch them, and then she stood. When she walked back into that mansion with Mr. Harrison and his team, she was no longer the quiet, invisible wife. She was Malcolm Hayes's daughter, and everyone was about to find out what that meant. The music cut off abruptly when Mr. Harrison stepped into the ballroom. Someone had told the DJ to stop, sensing something important was happening. The sudden silence made everyone turn and look. Devon stood in the center of the room, Crystal attached to his arm, looking irritated. "Can I help you?" Devon asked, his words slurred from alcohol. Mr. Harrison's voice was calm, clear, and carried through the entire room. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Harrison, Senior Estate Attorney for the Malcolm Hayes Trust." Devon frowned. "Malcolm Hayes? Who the hell is that? And what are you doing at my party?" Mr. Harrison gestured to Simone, who stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes blazing with something that made people take a step back. "Malcolm Hayes was Simone's father," Mr. Harrison said, "and this estate, along with 47 other properties across 3 states, belongs to her." You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you could have heard a feather land on carpet. The silence was that complete, that total. Devon's face went from confused to shocked to disbelieving in about 3 seconds. Beverly's mouth fell open. Rochelle's phone actually slipped from her hand and clattered on the marble floor. "What?" Devon finally managed. Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase with deliberate slowness, pulling out a stack of legal documents. He handed the top one to Devon. "This is the property deed for this estate. Malcolm Hayes built this mansion in 2012, valued currently at $38 million. Upon his death in 2015, it was transferred to his only daughter and heir, Simone Hayes." Devon's hands shook as he took the document, his eyes scanning the words but not really processing them. This had to be a mistake, some kind of joke, but the official seals, the signatures, the legal language, it was all real. Mr. Harrison wasn't done. "The company you work for, Devon, Hayes Development Group. Your boss, Mr. Wilson, leases the primary office building from the Hayes Trust. The building you've been going to every day for 5 years. Simone owns it, which technically makes her your landlord." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Crystal's grip on Devon's arm loosened. Andre stood in the corner, his mouth slightly open, trying to process what he was hearing. Beverly stumbled backward and sat down hard in a nearby chair. "This is insane," Rochelle finally said, finding her voice. "You're lying. All of you are lying." Mr. Harrison turned to her, his expression unchanged. "I have tax documents, trust papers, and Malcolm Hayes's last will and testament. Would you like to see them?" He spread more documents across the nearest table. Property deeds, bank statements, corporate filings. Each one bore Malcolm Hayes's signature. Each one listed Simone as the beneficiary. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "Malcolm Hayes was a self-made billionaire," Mr. Harrison continued, addressing the room now. "He built his empire over 30 years, reinvesting every profit, acquiring properties across the Southeast. He kept his wealth private to protect his daughter from exactly what has happened here tonight. People who would value money over character. His estate is currently valued at $2.3 billion. Simone Hayes is the sole heir to everything her father built. The number hung in the air like a bomb. $2.3 billion. People started whispering, pulling out phones, some backing toward the door like they wanted to escape. Devon stared at Simone, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. "You knew," he whispered, "this whole time. You knew and you never said anything." Simone stepped forward. For 4 years, she'd been quiet. For 4 years, she'd let this man and his family disrespect her, belittle her, treat her like she was nothing. But she wasn't nothing. She was Malcolm Hayes's daughter, and it was time everyone remembered what that meant. "My father taught me that real royalty doesn't need to announce itself," Simone said, her voice steady and strong. "I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. I thought if I stayed humble, if I stayed kind, if I served and sacrificed, you would see my value, but you didn't. You couldn't, because you were never looking at me. You were looking at what you thought I was, and you were wrong." She turned to face the entire room. These people who'd eaten her food, drank her wine, disrespected her in her own father's house. "This mansion you're standing in, every brick, every piece of furniture, every chandelier, my father built it with his own hands and his brilliant mind. He poured his heart into this place, dreaming of the family that would fill these halls. And you," she looked at Devon, "you turned it into a mockery. You brought your mistress into my father's home. You humiliated me in front of my children in the house my father built for us." Beverly tried to stand, tried to say something, but her legs gave out. Rochelle just stood frozen, her phone forgotten on the floor. Simone turned to Beverly. "You called me worthless. You laughed when your son told our children to call another woman mom. You've been living in my house, eating my food, disrespecting me at every opportunity, and you never once stopped to wonder why I stayed so quiet, why I never fought back." Then she looked at Rochelle. "You filmed my humiliation. You posted it online for your followers, turned my pain into your content. I hope the likes were worth it." Finally, she faced Crystal. The other woman had gone pale, all her confidence draining away. "And you thought you won something. You thought you took my husband, my life, my family. But you were just a temporary distraction in a game you didn't even know you were playing." Mr. Harrison stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "I have some additional documents to deliver." He pulled out a large manila envelope and handed it to Devon. "This is a 30-day eviction notice, the verbal lease agreement that Simone provided to you, out of love and trust, has been terminated due to breach of contract and severe emotional damages. You have 30 days to vacate this property." Devon's knees nearly buckled. "You can't do this." "She owns the property outright," Mr. Harrison said simply. "She absolutely can." He turned to Beverly and handed her another envelope. "Mrs. Johnson, the townhouse you've been living in for the past 3 years, rent-free, is also owned by the Hayes Trust. You also have 30 days to vacate." Beverly couldn't even speak. She just clutched the envelope, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Harrison looked around the room at all the shocked faces, all the people who'd celebrated Devon's cruelty just an hour ago. "I suggest everyone leave now. This party is over." People started moving immediately, grabbing their coats, their purses, rushing toward the exits. No one wanted to be there when this situation got worse. Andre stopped briefly near Simone, his face full of respect and something like relief. "Good for you," he said quietly, then left. Within 10 minutes, the mansion was nearly empty. Just Devon, Beverly, Rochelle, Crystal, Simone, and the attorneys remained. That's when Brianna and Jamal appeared at the top of the stairs. They'd woken up, heard the commotion, and come inside. When they saw their mother standing tall, saw their father looking defeated, they didn't hesitate. They ran down the stairs and straight to Simone, wrapping their arms around her waist. "Mommy," Brianna said, her voice breaking, "we only want you." Jamal looked at his father with eyes too old for a 6-year-old. "You hurt Mommy. You made us call someone else Mom. That was mean." Devin reached for them, his face crumbling. "Kids, wait. I can explain." But Jamal pulled away. "No, we want Mommy." And in that moment, watching his children choose his wife over him, watching everything he thought he had disappear like smoke, Devin finally understood what he'd lost. Not the mansion, not the lifestyle, not even the respect. He'd lost his family, and he'd done it to himself. The next morning, Devin showed up to work like it was any other day. He'd spent the night in a hotel, replaying the previous evening over and over, still trying to make sense of it. He walked into the Hayes Development Group building, a building he now knew his wife owned, and headed straight for his office. But before he could get there, Mr. Wilson's assistant intercepted him. "Mr. Wilson needs to see you immediately." Devin's stomach dropped. He followed her to the executive office, where Mr. Wilson sat behind his desk, looking grim. "Sit down, Devin." Devin sat. "I received a call this morning," Mr. Wilson said slowly, "from the Hayes Trust. Apparently they own this building, and apparently you've been mistreating the owner's daughter." Devin tried to speak, but Wilson held up a hand. "I don't want to hear it. The trust has made it very clear. Either you go or they terminate our lease and we lose this location. So you're fired, effective immediately. Pack your desk and get out." Devin stumbled out of the office in a daze. His colleagues watched as he packed his things into a box, some looking sympathetic, others looking satisfied. Word had already spread about what happened at the party. Rochelle's live streams and posts had ensured that. By noon, Devin was trending on social media, and not in a good way. Crystal stopped answering his calls that same day. When he finally tracked her down at a restaurant 3 days later, she was sitting with another man, someone older, richer, more powerful. She saw Devin standing there and smiled, a cold, dismissive smile. Then she turned back to her date and laughed at something he said, completely ignoring Devin. He understood then what Simone had tried to tell him. Crystal had never loved him. She'd loved what she thought he represented, and now that he represented nothing, she had no use for him. Beverly and Rochelle were evicted exactly 30 days later. They tried everything, apologizing, begging, showing up at the mansion gate. But Simone didn't respond. She'd moved on. Beverly ended up moving in with a distant cousin in Birmingham. Her pride shattered. Rochelle's social media following turned on her after the party footage went viral. Brands dropped her sponsorships. Comments flooded her posts. "You mocked a billionaire heiress and thought you did something?" The jokes really do write themselves. Karma served hot and fresh. Devin lost everything in a matter of weeks. His job, his reputation, his family. He ended up in a small apartment on the edge of town, barely able to afford rent. His lawyer told him the divorce was proceeding, and given his behavior, Simone would almost certainly get full custody of the children. "What about visitation?" Devin asked desperately. "She's offering supervised visits once a month. Given what you did at that party, you're lucky to get that." One night, about 3 months after the party, Devin drove past the estate. He couldn't help himself. He had to see it one more time. The gates were closed, but through the bars, he could see lights on in the house. Could see Brianna and Jamal playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening air. They looked happy, happier than they'd ever looked when he was around. Simone appeared on the front porch, calling the kids in for dinner. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down, that gold locket glinting at her throat. She looked peaceful, free, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Devin wanted to get out of the car, to call out to her, to apologize for everything, but he couldn't move. He just sat there, outside the gates of what used to be his life, watching the family he'd destroyed be happy without him. Inside the estate, Simone's life was transforming. She'd stopped hiding. She came forward publicly as Malcolm Hayes's daughter, not for ego or attention, but to honor her father's legacy. She established the Malcolm Hayes Foundation officially, with her face and name attached. The foundation focused on helping single parents, funding education, building community centers. She poured her father's billions into making the world better, exactly like he would have wanted. She renovated the estate, making it truly hers, but she kept her father's study exactly as he'd left it. The old desk, the photos on the wall, the books on the shelves. On that desk, she placed the gold locket, open so his photo was always visible. Brianna and Jamal thrived. They went to therapy to process the divorce, the party, all of it. Slowly, they healed. They understood that their father had made terrible choices, but they still loved him. They just didn't need him anymore. Their mother was enough. 3 months after everything fell apart, Devin showed up at the estate gate one afternoon. Security called Simone, asking if she wanted to see him. She thought about it for a long moment, then walked down the driveway. She stood on one side of the iron gates. He stood on the other, like they were in 2 different worlds now, which, in a way, they were. "I'm sorry," Devin said, and his voice broke. "I was a fool. I didn't see what I had. I was so focused on climbing, on achieving, on impressing people who don't matter. I lost sight of what was real." "Simone, I'm so sorry." Simone looked at him for a long moment, her face calm. "You didn't see me because you never really looked, Devin. You saw what you wanted to see. Someone quiet, someone easy to control, someone who wouldn't challenge you. That wasn't love. That was convenience." "Can I see the kids?" he asked desperately. "Once a month, supervised visits. My lawyer will send you the schedule. But you don't get to hurt them again, or me." "I understand." He paused, looking up at the mansion behind her. "I really messed up, didn't I?" "Yeah," Simone said simply. "You did." And then she turned and walked back up the driveway, back to her children, back to her life. Devin watched her go, knowing he'd lost something he'd never get back. He'd lost a queen. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Simone stood on the balcony of the estate at sunset. Below her, Brianna and Jamal played in the garden, their laughter filling the air. The landscaper had just finished planting new roses where Malcolm's old ones had been. The whole property felt renewed, alive, like it was breathing again after years of being suffocated. Simone touched the spot where her locket used to hang. She'd placed it in her father's study, but she didn't need to wear it anymore to remember his words. They were part of her now, woven into her bones. She thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the public humiliation, but she also thought about the freedom that came after, the peace of no longer hiding, the joy of being fully herself, unapologetically. She'd learned something her father had tried to teach her all along. That true power doesn't come from announcing yourself. It comes from knowing yourself. Devin had spent years trying to make her feel small, but he'd only been able to do that because she'd let him. The moment she remembered who she was, Malcolm Hayes's daughter, a woman of strength and grace, everything shifted. The estate sign at the front gate had been changed. It no longer read, "The Hayes Residence." Now it said, "Malcolm Hayes Memorial Estate." Her father's name, his legacy, visible for everyone to see. Simone smiled, watching her children play, watching the sun set over the land her father had built with his own hands. She'd honored his memory not by announcing her wealth, but by living with the character he'd instilled in her. And in the end, that character had saved her. This story teaches us something powerful. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never assume that someone's kindness means they have nothing. And remember, never judge a book by its cover. That quiet person you're disrespecting might just be royalty in disguise. Until next time, stay blessed, stay humble,